Thank you, Pleasantville Garden Club. As Mitzi said, I've had the pleasure to work alongside several of your members. And so I'm delighted today to share my feelings and knowledge about bees. I grew up in Suffolk County, Long Island. I had a woodland area in my backyard, and in the early mid 50s to, children were allowed to run around and be on their own. So I spent a lot of time in the forest, and I was forest bathing before I knew what it was. And my mom was a flower gardener, and everybody thinks I'm a flower gardener, but I am a wildlife gardener. And I never had any interest in insects, really. I kind of knew they were around, but 11 years ago, one of the garden members of one of my other clubs said that they had been a beekeeper and suggested I try it. And as a profession, I was a registered nurse, so I like to take care of things naturally. And I said, okay, I'll try it. And so that's how I got started with beekeeping, and I'm hooked. Mm-hmm. So this is a picture of my garden. They're climbing roses, they're thornless, and this is one of my hives. I use styrofoam hives, by the way, because wooden ones are just too heavy for me. I can't lift them. I have a whole system of how I am able to move them around, because it's like 50, 60 pounds sometimes to lift them off. So I take half out and then lift it and move and take another half out. So the basic science of bees. Honeybees are members of the phylum Arthropod. The genus is Apios mellifera. The life cycle is an egg, a larva, a pupa, and an adult. The physiology is an exoskeleton, vertebrates with hard shells. And this, even though it doesn't look like it's hard, those are kind of hard shells that are on the back. They have a head, which is over here. They have a thorax here, and then they have an abdomen. They cannot build or repair tissue. So if they're injured, they either work injured or they're out. Okay, and this is me with my bees and a frame from the beehive. So this was the scene that I said is in my garden with the thornless climbing roses, which I've had for over 20 years. These are styrofoam hives. I don't know if you can tell that by looking at them, but it is essential for me. I just can't do it without it. And then as I was going through, thank you for telling me, this is the head, this is the thorax, and this is the abdomen. And here are the little sections of little protective body parts. Honeybees, 95% of them are female, and they die when their wings wear out. So they actually work themselves to death. It's pretty amazing. They have a charge, a physical body charge, and bees are positively charged and plants are negatively charged. And so if you can see on this bee how hairy it is, that all the pollen, as it dips its head down to get the nectar, will attach to the body part of the bee. And then this is the queen. There's only one per hive. She lays all the eggs. Her lifespan can be 1 to 3 years, sometimes longer, but not necessarily in this world. She mates with 8 to 15 drones, and those are the male bees, and that's for diversity in genetics. she has pheromones. Each hive has their own pheromone smell. And so that's how they know they belong to their ecosystem. Then the worker bee, like I said, mostly female, all females. Males don't work. That's it. I don't know how that happened, but they're the performers of the hive. They can sting. The queen bee can sting, but her stinger isn't barbed. I have a photo later that shows what the worker bee's stinger looks like, and you can see why she dies and the stinger comes out of her. Males don't sting. They're just there. Okay, now I'm going to show a video, and I want you to see if you can see the queen. If you can, then that's good. If not, I'll show it again, and then you will be able to point it out.
Hey, honey. She's going down the middle. Can you spy the queen?
Okay, so let me go back. Here it is again.
Hey, honey.
And this is her.
She's going down the middle. Can you spy the queen?
She's longer. I kind of think they're sexy, but she has a longer body because she has to back in and deposit the egg in the comb. So and she stores all these sperm. She has millions of sperm inside of her. She can lay up to 1,000 eggs a day. It's incredible. And this is the bee head. This is a terrific book. They used an electron microscope to take photographs, and you can see how hairy a bee actually is. Their head, they have 2 compound eyes, and they have thousands of hexagon faceted lenses, and they can detect movement. They're sensitive to ultraviolet and polarized light. Now, there's a theory that the possibility that they know how to build hexagon cells is because of the way they see through their eyes. I mean, maybe, it's right there. So it's very interesting. Honeybees are only out in the day using polarized sensitivity to orient and navigate. Otherwise, they live in a very dark environment. Bees use the sun position above the horizon to give direction. So when they are, that's it. If they're out too late at night, they probably won't make it, or if they live, they can't move until the next morning when the sun comes up. They have their antenna, which is right here. And the antenna is a sophisticated apparatus that tastes, touches, hears, smells, and can tell how fast they're flying. They can fly up to 15 miles an hour, which is amazing. Bees have a proboscis, and it's a straw-like mouth, and they have several chambers so that they can drink the liquid from the nectar and water and honey. And they have an extra stomach that they can put nectar in to bring back to the hive. So they're really not mixing it into their own stomach. They have an extra place. Butterflies, elephants also have proboscis. Let's see. Here's the thorax. The thorax has the wings. There's 4 wings, but it always looks like 2 because they have these little hooks that they hook on, and they make it so that they can have, a better flying ability. They can flap their wings up to 230 times a second. That's how they make the buzzing sound. It's their wings. The waggle dance. Oh my goodness. The waggle dance has to do with where and how much food source is out there, or possibly a new place to move to. The bees have these legs they have brushes and combs. And so as their hairy body collects the pollen, they brush it off. And on the two back legs, they have little baskets and they put the pollen in there. And so they take it back to the hive. But this is nature's way of causing pollination. I mean, the whole world, that's what we're here to do, is continually reproduce. There's pollen in the air all the time. But honeybees happen to be extremely proficient at it. And it has to do more with their numbers. There's just so many of them. Okay. Here's the female stinger. You can see that it's barbed. So when she stings you, it gets in your skin. And as she flies away, or you push her away, it takes it out her abdomen. So she's gutted. Only the females have stingers, like I said. And here's the little pollen basket on the back of her leg that she puts the pollen in. Okay, division of labor. Bees need to be neat and clean. Everybody wants that kind of environment in their household. They don't defecate inside the hive. If anything is dirty, they take it out. Their jobs work by how old they are. In the beginning, when they're born, they are expected to go back into the comb and clean it out for the queen bee to come lay another egg. Nurse bees are probably 4 or 5 days old. They're feeding bee bread, which is pollen and honey mixed together. Then they cure honey. Honey has to be fanned down to absolutely 17% water, and then it's able to be sealed by wax, which they found it in tombs in the pyramids. Honey doesn't go bad. It's amazing, the properties. They have to feed and clean the queen. The queen, once she goes out and mates, doesn't leave the hive again until she possibly swarms. So they're always feeding her and cleaning up after her. But I don't envy her. She has a very busy job, laying thousands of eggs. So I don't know. Wouldn't want the job myself. The bees, one of their jobs is to provide wax and build new comb. The honeybees are very fortunate. They are able to pass wax flakes out of their abdomen. Wouldn't that be nice? And then they build a chain. It's called a festoon, and they pass the wax up to each other, and they build their comb. Processing food, they bring the nectar back from their, they pass it to the next bee. The next bee uses enzymes, just like when we eat, we have enzymes that break down the food, and then they either feed it to the young or they put it in the honeycombs. The hive has to be kept a certain temperature, and so bees are constantly fanning to cool it off or not. In the summertime, they use water as air conditioning and fanning. In the winter, they cluster together. They do not heat the whole hive. They only heat their cluster. And they have to keep it between 88 and 95 degrees, which is really amazing because the queen has to stay alive. Eventually, the bees begin to become guard bees, and so they are in front of the hive, protecting any other predator coming in. There's a lot of predators, wasps and hornets and birds and raccoons, possums, all kinds of bears. Everybody is interested in honey. Mice. The most dangerous job is foraging, and that's when the bee goes out and collects nectar and pollen and water. Propolis is another product that's used in the hive that's brought back by the bees. It's resin from pine trees and other sources. They use it as glue, and it's bacteria oriented. In the Civil War, honey was used on wounds. We didn't have antibiotics at the time, and there is peroxide type effect. So, and it's still used today in wound care if they're having a lot of trouble. And another job at the end is an undertaker. They remove, most bees when they're going to die leave the hive, but if they happen to die in the hive, they are removed by other bees. Male bees do not work. They're the concubines for the queen, and they die after they mate. So it's not such a great deal for them, I don't think, anyway. Okay, so the bee diet. Nectar and pollen. Pollen is the protein source. It contains lipids, vitamins, proteins, and minerals. Nectar is the carbohydrate source. It's sweet, it's sugars. When a bee goes out in the morning, they pick one flower, and that's the only type of flower that they will get pollen from. And that's how cross-pollination happens. They bring it back, they fill it into the honeycomb, and you'll see different color pollen in the beehive, but it's not mixed. Each one has its separate honeycomb. The beginning of the season, as we're coming up now, the first nectar source will be from trees. We don't see it, it's high above us, but most of the trees have tiny little flowers, and that's where the honeybee gets their start from the season. In warmer places, they can, manage all the time because they have a food source, but here our food source changes. And so in the summer, we have mostly flowers, and in the winter, I don't take honey until the spring. So I make sure that my bees have a healthy diet to eat. Let's see, the hive. The hive stands off the ground. That's so if a predator like a skunk or a raccoon were to try to go in the hive, they would expose their stomach. And supposedly they're not as hairy on their stomach because a bee can't sting through fur. So it makes them more, susceptible to being stung and being the bees can defend themselves. There's a bottom board that keeps it closed. There's a hive entrance. Oh, recently, that story about the murder hornets in Washington state, they said that they found that the bees were putting feces by the front of the hive. And people were saying, oh, that sounds terrible. Well, what they were trying to do is to take away the smell of the honey and the wax, because the wasp was attracted to the. And so if they can mask the smell of their hive, maybe they can discourage the wasp from coming, because wasps are, we'll get into that. Anyway, the main body of the hive is where she has brood, and then you try to keep the top of the hive where they have honey. It's not always, sometimes some people use what they call a queen excluder because it's a little shape that she can't get through. I don't do that, but I try to manage it because she'll move around. Obviously, she can go in the hive, and if there isn't enough room to have eggs in the bottom, she'll go. But if you want to extract honey, it's not. You don't want babies in that, so a lot of people like to keep it separate. But it's important for bees to have a variety of food source, and that's why it's important to plant for all the seasons. And a swarm happens, that's the way bees reproduce. The old queen will lay eggs for new queens, and she will take half of the hive, which is probably 20,000 bees. The average hive is from 10 to 50, say maybe more, 1,000 bees. So that's a lot of bees. And she goes off and looks for a new home, and she leaves the hive with the food source for the new queen. So she's set up, so she'll probably be all right. 16 to 25% is the survival rate of the swarms. So not all of them make it. I have techniques that I can do because I live on a half acre in a very crowded community, I don't want swarms because the swarms are going to go to people's houses and chimneys and garages and things like that. So I watch my beehives, and when I see that if the queen has made eggs, to make a new queen, I split the hive myself. And so this is a swarm from my yard, just to give you an indication of the amount of bees that are flying around when it happens. And you can catch them, but it's not so easy. They are following the pheromones of the queen. And it's difficult. There are some tricks. I've done some things, putting other lemongrass is something that people suggest. I think the most effective thing was to set up another hive. So to be or not to be, all righty. Everybody tends to call most flying bee-looking insects bees, but there's wasps and hornets. And it's important to know the difference because a wasp has a straight stinger. And so when they sting you, they don't lose it. So they can sting you repeatedly, giving you venom. A wasp has longer, thinner wings. They're not as hairy. And honeybees are vegetarians. Wasps are not. Wasps like meat. And that's why in August, when we're having hamburgers and hot dogs, if something is bothering you at that time, it is not a honeybee. It is a wasp, a yellow jacket, or a hornet. So those are just things to keep in mind. I don't know. Okay, so here's some trees that we all would recognize that are the first producers of pollen. I'm not going to read them off. You can see them. I am going to talk about a little bit about the fact of plant taxonomy, which is the grouping and classification of plants that was started in the early 1700s. They're used by botanists around the world. The genus is always indicated with a capital and first, and the species is second. So when we're choosing plants, I prefer native plants. It's important that the genus, after you look at the species, because there are many plants that have, like say the maple, ancestors or other species from Japan and other places. And so you could think that you're picking a native plant, but you're not. Some of the nurseries are much better now. Sprainbrook, they tell you which ones are natives, and that's important. As we move along, the shrubs also are coming out, and these are some of my favorites. As you can see, the flowers are different colors and different shapes. They have different fragrances. These are all things that attract pollinators. And I was concerned in the beginning that I would affect my native bees, but they don't seem to, from what research I've done, bother each other. They all seem to be very happy. They are just focused on collecting pollen and nectar. And, but the proboscis, like on a butterfly, I believe is longer than the proboscis on the honeybee. And for another example is the hummingbird. They can go down deep into a tubular flower, whereas a honeybee, if they need to, it depends on their how many flowers are available, will slice the bottom of the flower and cheat and go inside. But it's all depending on the what's available. Here in Westchester, my bees are very well fed. There's so many flowers. People plant so many things that it's just hard for them to be hungry. They have a wonderful food source. So let's see. In the beginning, hellebores are not native, but I just can't resist them. They don't seem to spread, and they just pop up and they just manage. And we all love bulbs, so they're nice early spring pollination plants. Ephemerals. I wanted to talk about ephemerals just a little bit. That's part of why I don't like Norway maples. Norway maples leaf before our trees do. And so ephemerals are the first flowering woodland plants. They're short-lived and they come between the snow melt and the tree leaf out. They're usually bulbs and combs and they're just wonderful, though. I mean, you were before talking about all the woodland gardens. That's one of my favorite things to go and see. You just, when you're planting a garden yourself with ephemerals, you just have to remember to put things that will come up, ferns and other perennials, because they do die back and then you don't want empty spaces. More spring trees, which we have. Wild cherries are one of my favorites. I love birch trees, and the dogwood is another wonderful one. You had a talk on flowering trees. They're so wonderful. They offer beauty and pollen. It's just fabulous. We just have to remember that we still want some of the big trees, because you just can't have just flowering short trees. We need to still plant big ones. All these storms with all this wind, we're all afraid of big trees now. My neighbor took down an American elm that was over 100 years old because they had it cabled, and they were very concerned about the way the if the branches came down, and it would have hit my house. So I guess all in all, it was better. Here you can see the blueberry flower is very tight. So when a bumblebee goes in to pollinate a blueberry flower, it's very hard for them. They damage their bodies. And I can start to talk about it now. So I said when a bee goes out, they stick to one flower. Well, you have somebody like me I'm a sideliner beekeeper because I have 7 hives, but commercial beekeepers are paid to take their bees and to pollinate. So when a commercial beekeeper takes his bees to a blueberry field, a lot of his bees are going to get injured from going into the flower. Now, the other problem is that they eat the same food, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, for whatever time it takes for them to pollinate these plants. So it's not very healthy. And that's part of the problem with bees being healthy. When they're taken to, say, the almond fields, they're not given any choice of what to eat, because they're there for a purpose, our purpose, to have them pollinate the almonds. But in the end, the bees, it's not the healthy thing for them. They're losing out on the variety. We all need to eat variety. We can't just eat one type of plant. Here's some more perennials from spring. You can see all the different colors. The bees, they like bright white, they like blue, they like yellow, they like ultraviolet. Hummingbirds, they say, like red, so bees don't see red. But interestingly enough, another fact is that they say that flowers can signal whether they have pollen and nectar. So if a flower runs out of pollen and nectar, they're not sending the notice, come, get some food. Nature's amazing. If only we humans didn't interrupt it so much. And dandelions, I love dandelions. I wish they didn't have such a bad rap. They're one of the flowers everybody's allowed to pick when they're little. We're allowed to make bouquets. We make little wreaths. And then everybody poisons them. I don't know. It's something we have to work on. In the summer, here's some more trees. A lot of times, the flowers, we'll see these little flowers on these trees. It's a little more visible as we go on. Some more perennials. I don't know. It's just wonderful. Look at the colors. Look at the shapes. Think about the fragrances. It's just, I see why people do like to garden for flowers. Sumac is wonderful. The sweet pepper bush, another great one. I love the oak leaf hydrangea. I have the button bush. If children were encouraged to go out in nature and watch what insects are doing, I think that, it would be helpful. Children are our future, and we have to encourage them to go outside and participate. Joe Pyeweed is one of my favorites. I like to keep the stalks as native bee shelters for putting in the yard. Borage is another very popular bee flower. I plant it with seed, just throw seeds around and it comes up. In the fall, the flowers are starting to be less, but we can plant, there's plenty of things that we can plant around to offer the bees and ourselves beauty. Here's some more ironweed, the trumpet vine. Look how hard the bee has to go inside to get nectar from that. And the honeysuckle also. I have witch hazel. I have witch hazel that I bought too and put them on either side of my walkway. It just so happened that each of them was grafted onto a witch hazel, and I have 4 different types. The 2 that I bought were not matched, and the 2 that were grafted onto it are not matched. So I have witch hazel blooming from October through April. It's amazing. More fall perennials. Mountain mint is wonderful. The mint is brought back to the beehive. They like it. I think it's medicinal for them. They are, all over it. Okay, now, what can I do to help pollinators? Okay, so our choices matter. It's really up to us. Nurseries supply non-native plants because it was fashionable at one point to have them because they weren't affected by insects. So, oh great, let's get this plant. It won't have insects. But the Dr. Doug Tellamy, who is an entomologist at the University of Delaware, went out into a property he bought and was looking for insects. And he found that there were no insects because between the invasive species that were on his property and the non-natives, the insects couldn't live. Now, birds need insects. 95% of baby bird food are insects. And it's part of our whole ecosystem. So in order to attract birds, we need to attract insects. And native plants over many, many years have evolved for the insects to live together. As we know, because of monarchs, they need milkweed to lay their eggs. So when the eggs develop, the baby can eat the leaf and live. If we don't provide that, when the butterfly lays the eggs, then they're going to die. So we have to bring back native plants so that we can bring back insects. Insects have such a bad reputation because they eat crops and spread disease, but we really have to learn how to appreciate them. So now getting back to my honeybees, they want diverse plants in clumps. A honeybee is not going to go back to the hive and do a waggle dance to say that they found one flower, because they're doing the waggle dance for 100 other bees. And so it has to be larger amount of nectar and pollen for them to go back and do the dance and tell them where it is and what's there and how much food. They also need the flowers to provide food source over the whole season. Become a gardener for native plants. That's so important. As I was saying with the insects, but like having herb gardens and vegetable gardens are really important for children also. They're important for us, they feed us, but children need to know where food comes from. Our agricultural ways have to be changed, and it's important for children to know that we grow it and we eat it. So the soil has to be healthy for the plant to be healthy, for us to be healthy to eat it. Going organic, it's just the sustainable agriculture. They have seeds that are coated with insecticide, and seeds come coated naturally with what they need to grow. That's how nature's planned it. So when the companies coat the seed, it'll have a bright color. That's an indication you don't want it. It's systemic. It goes into the soil, it goes into our waterways, it goes in the vascular system of the plant, up to the nectar, up to the pollen, and then we eat it. So, sometimes people might say organic, why do we need organic? Well, we need it to be healthy. It is a little more expensive, but I think that at some point, I think that should be really the only way we provide food, in my opinion. They have hydroponics is a nice way. They're recycling water. In Kentucky and Tennessee, they have very large plants where they're providing food, and it's just so much healthier. We need genetic diversity, but it's been manipulated. The biotech companies have always wanted to produce more. We want to feed the world. We want to produce, but we've lost track of, health and small farms. We have huge monoculture farms. It's the land, it just can't sustain it. It'd be better if we could work on figuring out better ways to do it. And we can all be ecologist gardeners. We can choose to plant and buy things that don't have pesticides. Seeds live a very long time. Like poison ivy is the seed is supposed to be viable for up to 50 years. So when we are digging in the soil, we're always turning up seeds that catch light and start to grow. And it's, we just have to be so careful. Composting, my favorite thing. I don't know why. I'm a natural composter. I love to rebuild soil. I love to not waste. Our food, the Westchester Food Scrap Program, is like heaven. We don't have to put food into garbage. Food is not, it's not something that we should consider garbage. when it goes into the garbage and mixes with garbage, it makes methane gas. Methane gas is 80 times more toxic than carbon dioxide. So by joining the food scrap program, because composting in your backyard is tricky. I don't believe it is with leaf piles, but somehow people don't want to do that. But leaf piles are fabulous. And mulch mowers now, because some leaves don't break down like oak, but if you mulch the leaves before you pile them, they'll break down. Now, there is some suggestion that maybe we shouldn't mulch leaves because insects overwinter in leaves. So I personally don't have that many oak leaves that I can't manage just piling them up. So that should definitely be done. My town pays $150,000 a year to take leaves up to New Hampshire. It's just incredible. And everybody has a space in their yard to make a pile of leaves. Recycling in New York. We are the world's leading single-use plastics and multiple solid waste production. It's something we just have to work on. But hey, recycling is so tricky. They change it all the time. We don't know if this goes in and that goes in, but we just have to keep working on it. You know, somebody can do it. Somebody can figure it out. Also, this week in the New York Times, there was an article on EPR, which is Extended Producer Responsibility, which now we can try to have companies pay for their packaging, give incentives to companies to go greener. They shouldn't, when they've been doing this in Europe and Canada for years. I lived in London in the early 90s, and when I went to the grocery store, you brought your bag, because if you didn't, they charged you. At that time, it was equivalent to 25 cents. That was, 30 years ago. We're just getting up to that now, but it's okay because we're getting there, and Westchester's banned the plastic bags. And so, but we have to keep trying. We have the ERP laws that should be for electronic leftovers, paint, thermometers, batteries, and refrigeration things. And, those are things we need more of. But now we have to focus on paper, plastics, metal, and glass. It's close to half of our waste. We have to stay involved and make sure Andrew Cuomo gets it and includes this all in the climate change agenda. It could be a game changer. We have fabric recycling. The town of Bronxville somehow connected with a company that in Connecticut that is going to recycle old fabrics. Now, anything that can be donated to a charity is the best way. But after that, when you have things that somebody else wouldn't want, it's a shame. This again produces methane in our waste cycle. So fabric recycling, and our fashion industry is going to have to get on board with that. There was an article in the Times this week, the same thing. We've now have, because of COVID, we have sort of a restart, a reset. And, but it's all about our choices. If we go to the fashion and we're willing to wear things that are made of different materials and, support these companies that try to do it, then that will help us. It's fashion. I love fashion, but we really, to throw things out or get things out of style so quickly, it's something that we've created that I feel we need to change. Clean water. Oh my goodness. All our chemical pollutants. We have a water cycle on Earth, and we have just a certain amount of water, and it goes up and down, up and down, up and down. we have to protect it. Here in the Northeast, we're so fortunate that we don't have to worry like other places that don't have as much water, but it's just as much our responsibility. So for car washing and building washing, we need biodegradable soaps, soy-based things for driveways so that we're not polluting. We think, oh, this is my property, but your property, water runs off your property onto somebody else's property, and somebody else's water runs on yours. It's just like my bees. My bees go out and they collect nectar for up to 5 miles. So when they come back, they're bringing nectar from, say, somebody used a pesticide in one section and then somebody used a different one there. Well, it mixes in the hive because they don't know, and 2 different bees are bringing back the different chemicals in the nectar. Okay, so I talked about our agricultural landscape has been modified, and the pest management is crazy. We have plant breeding. We have these precision equipment that run over and bulldoze everything, and chemicals and fertilizers. We just have to stop because thank goodness. And here in Westchester, we have water on both sides. We have the Hudson River and we have the Long Island Sound. We have so many migrating birds. We are so blessed with our landscaping and what we have to offer. It's so important. I was so relieved when they took phosphates out of fertilizers because you know that it's hurting the aquatic animals. Okay, planting trees. We must plant trees. They make a significant difference. Trees fight global warming. They absorb CO2. They produce oxygen. They help soil health. They retain water. They clean water. They drop organic matter. They cool urban areas, and they can help stop erosion. Photosynthesis, it's like all very science oriented. It's there. EPA activism. Rachel Carson wrote The Silent Spring in 1962. She was very aware that humans, pesticides, habitat loss, and climate change were happening. So the Environmental Protection Agency was started in the 70s under the Nixon administration for American conservation, but for air, water, land pollution. It's environmental justice, but it's really about cleaning up, when the land has been ruined. So land restoration, which is very difficult to do. And so thank goodness they're doing it, but we really need to get in a position where we're not, causing that. So try to keep natural habitat. This one I can go on forever. We have to first consider global warming. And in ways that we can do that, we have to work on renewable energy. We need to decrease nighttime pollution. We have seen the worst fires, hurricanes, the sea ice is melting. We have records break for heat, bleaching coral reefs, increased atmosphere methane, slowing down of the North Atlantic current. Going back to normal is not the answer. There is no normal. We have to deal with floodings, droughts, famines, civil wars, and more crop failures and more extinctions of animals, collapsing agriculture, and fishery water shortages. This pandemic has given us the opportunity to stop and think about changing our ways. we can deal with the consequences of global warming. There's a book and a movie out, and it's called Where Did You Go, Bernadette? And in it, it's so cute because Bernadette's neighbor wants her to remove some raspberries or something from her yard. And Bernadette knows that if she removes them, that she'll cause a mudslide. But the neighbor continues to pester her. And so she has all of the bushes removed from the side of the property, and sure enough, there's a landslide of mud into the woman's house. And so it's an example of how we, humans have to be careful. I think we have to think about rebuilding in areas where we've had disasters from flooding, wetlands, coastal areas, estuaries, mangroves. Those are nature's ways of protecting our land, and we have built houses on them. And maybe they can't be put back there if they've been ruined. Maybe it's time to, stop building there. We just have to think about, how we're affecting the environment. Our lawns, we have to reduce the size of our lawns. Why lawns are so important to us? Europeans like lawns, and I guess we feel it's a grand thing, but they're chemical wastelands. All they do is require to be fed and to be poisoned. So why would we want our children playing on them? Why would we want our dogs? Why would we want insects? It just doesn't make sense. So things we can do are mowing at higher levels, doesn't allow weeds to grow in. Mulch mowing allows the grass to rehydrate itself and nourish itself. Use less chemicals. Rod Snodsmith was a fabulous author and talk show host from many years ago, and he had many wonderful sayings, but one of his sayings that I always think about was follow the label and the instructions. If they wanted you to use more, they would tell you that. But somehow people tend to think more is better, but it isn't. We're poisoning our land, it's just so important to us. Testing soil is another good thing. Don't treat without knowing what you have. The Cornell Cooperative Extension has places, you can get to send away to get your soil tested. Garden power equipment by our landscapers. I think that a lot of communities are getting rid of the noxious emissions, and maybe we can go to electric. I know my town bans using it for a certain time of the year, but I love to rake, so I don't understand, how that is, but that's the way it is. Certified natural habitat. I love this. This was part of my wildlife. You need to offer food, water, cover, places to raise their young. And so that's really pretty easy to do, in my opinion. You want to have bird baths. By the way, bees don't swim, and I don't think butterflies do. So that's why they need very shallow areas, and they love to drink in the mud because they're picking up minerals. And so, if you can offer a little water on the side, that's always great. Offering places to shelter, very important to have understory trees. We tend to have the lawn and then trees. We need to have layers. There has to be, if you can see in my yard in this photo, I have a lot of layers. So the animals can hide in it. Some of them like to have nests higher, some like to have nests lower, all different choices for the different birds. And you can have bird feeders. There's nothing wrong with that. I love that, but I like having natural things. And so my next suggestion is to invest in environmental, social, and governance companies. This is a new or for me, new. You can ask for your investment companies to look up companies that are sustainable and ethical. And they're starting to think of going from cradle to cradle. So they really want companies that aren't producing toxic things. And if they are, they're being responsible about taking care of it. So I just feel that that's a very important way to help pollinators. This week, they talked about mushroom leather shoes and clothes you can recycle in the Times. I found it very interesting. Pollinator pathways. Yeah, I mean, we are all connected. We need to make healthy environments for the insects and the pollinators to travel around. They don't know my yard, your yard. It's all irrelevant to them. The Audubon has wonderful lectures. Westchester Community College Native Plant Center. They're a terrific program I've been involved in. The Westchester Community College also has degrees in environmental sciences as an associate's degree, which I think people have kind of lost sight that that's such a wonderful business to go in. The food scrapping program, which I mentioned under recycling, is just terrific. Our town, hemmed and hawed for over a year with us pushing. It was always, where can we put it? We finally have gotten permission, but we are under construction, so we're not off yet, but we will. The Master Gardener programs are fabulous. The Sierra Club, mentioned earlier in your meeting, the Federated Conservation of Westchester. I don't know that, but I'm going to look in it, and I'm sure I left off many other wonderful things that you can join. Pesticides. Okay. I just have to begin with pesticides are known as neurotoxins. They're used to kill rodents, insects, microorganisms by disorienting them. And so you have to think of where they began, okay? Chemical warfare started very early on, say in the 1700s, and then it was used in World War I and World War II. And thankfully it was decided that it was not a nice thing to do to humans, so they banned it. But they had already built companies and they had already developed these products. So since insects have such a bad rap, someone along the way suggested, we can use this on insects and then we'll have more crop production. So in fact, that's what happened. And they did have more crop production. And so it just got used. But DDT was found to affect the population of birds was going down, and they didn't understand why, wild birds. And when they checked, they realized that the bird's shell was not hard enough, and it had to do with the DDT. So they fortunately banned that. And Europe has been ahead of us with all of this. Unfortunately, they're still using, mustard gas type things in Iraq and Iran a few years ago. That was, reported, but it's illegal because they realize how bad it is. But it's okay to put in soil. So it's not okay. And Bayer is one of the big producers, and Bayer is in Germany, and Germany had a lot of problems with the pesticide, but it seems like Bayer is involved with the testing of how it affects the insects. And so there's always ways to manipulate how the tests are interpreted. But the French decided that they didn't want these neonicotinoids in their agricultural business because they realized that it was causing such problems in the bee populations. And we know bees are important for our food. So they were able to have them restricted in France. And we are working on it. Trump administration, just before he left, let neonicotinoids be able to be used in Florida, and also some antibiotics which had been banned. And the farmers in Florida realized that this is poison, and it doesn't help the citrus plants. It just prolongs them dying, and the plants get used to bacteria. They get resistant, just like people do if they use too many antibiotics. And so even though they were told they could use it, they realize now they shouldn't. It's like not the right way. There was a nursery in Hartsdale area where the owner had gone to Cornell University and gotten a degree in agriculture, and he was spraying all the time. And when he wanted his children to take over the business, they said to him, no, we're not going to put on a hazmat suit and a respirator to spray. That's not right. And he thought about it. And he said, you know what, you're right. But at the time, he had been taught that the way to deal with insects and problems was through chemicals. And so he now has written books and promotes natural pest suppression, and realized that, it was wrong, but it's big chemical companies, and they're the ones who profit from it, having pesticides. We all really don't. It's just not something that is healthy. We have to rethink about how we're exposing birds and bees and bats and butterflies and our children and our dogs and ourselves. In 2014, the EPA analyst found that neonicotinoids seed treatment provides little or no benefit to farmers. So our real goal is to go to organic land management practices. That's where we have to, it's up to us. We have to do it. Honey is not regulated by the Food and Drug Administration. Just last month in Vermont, they had done a honey sampling, and they tested the samples, and 40% of the samples had been doctored with things, but nobody checks them. So now they are going to, starting 2021, test honey, because honey can come, the United States banned honey from China. And so what China did was they sent the honey to Italy, they sent it to France, they sent it to other countries and had it rebottled. And then it was sent to the United States. So this just can't, this can't be. It's very hard to know. Honey tastes the same when it's doctored. You don't taste the, they use simple syrup, they use corn syrup. You just don't taste it. It's hard. They can even burn the simple syrup to have it look brown and dark. It's just amazing what people will do to make money. But the easiest thing, I think, is to support local beekeepers, and hopefully they're not doing that, and you'll be able to get better quality honey. I wanted to promote, if you want to become a beekeeper, the easiest way is to get the solitary hive boxes for the native bees. Native bees live in colonies, but they only live in, say 300 or so. And so they're great pollinators, and especially for apples, but they need naked land and nobody likes naked land. So if a farmer has a stream and can clear out some of the land around it, he'll have a lot of solitary bees. But 300 bees isn't going to pollinate like a hive. A hive has 10 to 50,000, 80,000 bees. It's just a numbers game. Of course, they're going to be able to pollinate better. It's not that they're special, they just do. And so yeah, so that could be a project for Girl Scouts or a young group. Use paper straws and pile them up and make a nice little home for solitary bees and put it out in your yard. And this is my backyard. Last year, we were at dinner talking about how I have never seen it must have had rained, and I said I never saw a rainbow here in Westchester. And my daughter looked out the window and said, there it is. And sure enough, so I ran out and I got that photograph. And so thank you.